The first time I saw the number, I thought it was a mistake. A typo on the credit card statement, buried deep in the online portal I rarely checked. It was a charge from a boutique jewelry store in Palo Alto, a place neither Marcus nor I had ever mentioned visiting. $4,750. My finger hovered over the mouse, a tiny tremor starting in my hand. Marcus travelled for work sometimes, but usually to places like Seattle or Austin. Not a fancy jewelry shop an hour south of our home in the San Francisco Bay Area suburbs. We weren't exactly struggling, but we weren't dropping nearly $5,000 on impulse buys either. Not without a discussion, at least. I clicked into the transaction details, my heart starting a slow, heavy beat against my ribs. The date was 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday. Marcus had been home that week. He'd said he was working late, a big project deadline. He'd come home after the kids were asleep, smelling faintly of some unfamiliar floral perfume, not his usual office scent. I'd been tired, hadn't thought much of it. Now a cold knot began to form in my stomach. This wasn't the first flicker of unease I'd felt. There had been others, small things I'd pushed aside. His phone, once left carelessly on the counter, was now always in his pocket or face down. He'd become defensive if I asked about his day, sometimes snapping in a way that was completely out of character. The kids, Liam, who was 7, and Maya, 5, had even picked up on it. "Daddy's grumpy," Liam had observed one morning, echoing a feeling I hadn't voiced. Then there was the incident with Buddy. It was a sunny Saturday morning a couple of months ago, the kind of crisp, bright day that makes the Bay Area air feel like champagne. Our golden retriever Buddy, a ball of boundless energy and tail wags, loved to chase squirrels in the backyard. Marcus was supposed to be watching him while I took Liam and Maya to pick up new soccer gear in the next town over. It was a quick trip, maybe an hour-and-a-half round trip. When we pulled back into the driveway of our split-level house, nestled on a quiet tree-lined street in Mountain View, something felt wrong. The backyard gate, usually latched securely, was wide open, swinging idly in the breeze. Buddy was gone. Panic seized me. Buddy was a homebody, but he was fast and friendly to a fault, easy prey for someone looking for a free dog, or worse, the busy traffic on the main road a few blocks away. We spent a frantic hour searching the neighborhood, calling his name, the kids tearfully clutching my hands. Marcus, who had been on a very important work call in his home office, finally emerged, looking annoyed more than concerned. "He probably just wandered off," he'd said dismissively, already pulling out his phone. "He'll come back." My stomach had twisted. This wasn't the Marcus who had begged for a dog, who had spent hours training him, who usually fussed over him like another child. Thankfully, a neighbour found Buddy sniffing around their rose bushes a few streets over, completely unharmed but for a few burrs in his fur. I'd hugged the dog, relief washing over me, but the image of that open gate, Marcus's indifference, and the chilling thought of what could have happened stayed with me. It was a small crack, a hairline fracture in the image of the responsible husband and father I thought I knew. At the time, I'd attributed it to stress from his job. Now, seeing that jewelry charge, the pieces clicked into place with a sickening certainty. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the familiar click-clack a counterpoint to the frantic beating of my heart. Years of debugging complex code had trained my brain for this, finding the anomaly, tracing the source, understanding the logic, however twisted. I opened our shared online banking portal. Marcus handled most of the bills, a division of labour that had always worked. Now, it felt like a blindfold. I scrolled back through months of statements. At first, nothing jumped out, just the usual mortgage payment for our house, utility bills, grocery runs at Safeway, gas station charges from Chevron, kids' activities fees. But the deeper I went, the more I saw it. Small, recurring charges from unfamiliar online retailers, larger withdrawals from ATMs in parts of the city he rarely visited. A sudden increase in spending on dining out, not at our usual family spots, but at trendy restaurants in the city, places with names like the Velvet Room or Alchemy Bistro. And then the really big ones. A series of wire transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Payments to a luxury apartment complex address in a different zip code. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a single purchase. This was a pattern. An expensive, secret life, systematically draining our joint finances. The jewellery store charge was just the tip of a very large, very cold iceberg. I needed to see his phone. He kept it locked, of course, but I knew his old passcodes. We'd shared everything once. I waited until he was in the shower that evening. My hands trembled as I picked up his phone from the nightstand. I tried the first code, our anniversary. Incorrect. The second, Liam's birthday. Incorrect. The third, Maya's birthday. Incorrect. He'd changed them all. A fresh wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't paranoia. This was deliberate concealment. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. But the analytical part of my brain, the part I relied on for my job as a senior software engineer at a tech firm in Sunnyvale, kicked in. Don't panic. Gather data. Assess the situation. What else could I access? Our shared laptop, our home network, our cloud storage accounts. Over the next few nights after Marcus was asleep, or claimed to be, I became a ghost in my own house, moving silently from room to room, the glow of my laptop screen the only light. I accessed our shared laptop, digging through browser history, examining downloads, checking synced accounts. I found searches for luxury apartments San Francisco, best divorce lawyers Bay Area, how to hide assets in California divorce. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread. Divorce? He was planning to leave and hiding money? The betrayal was deeper, colder than I had imagined. I found encrypted messaging apps I didn't recognize. Using tools I knew from cybersecurity training, I managed to access some of the data. The messages were sickeningly clear. Pet names I'd never heard him use. Plans to meet, complaints about his boring home life and his demanding wife, and messages to someone named Julian Croft. Julian, the name echoed in my head. I didn't know any Julian. Was this the person he was buying jewellery for? The person he was renting an apartment for? I dug deeper. I found photos. Marcus, laughing, arm in arm with a younger man, Julian Croft. He was attractive, stylish, everything Marcus outwardly projected, but rarely seemed to embody at home anymore. There were photos of them in restaurants I'd seen on the credit card statements, photos in the apartment I'd found the address for. Even photos of them on a weekend getaway to Napa Valley I hadn't known about, a trip he'd claimed was a last-minute business conference. The pain was a physical blow, sharp and sudden. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a complete, calculated deception, a double life funded by our shared resources, a future planned behind my back, a future that explicitly excluded me, and, based on his searches for divorce lawyers, likely the children too. I felt a profound sense of shame, a hot flush that spread from my neck up to my face. How could I have been so blind? All the little things, the phone, the grumpiness, Buddy getting out, weren't just stress. They were symptoms. Red flags waving wildly in the wind, and I had chosen to ignore them, to rationalize them away because the truth was too painful to contemplate. I needed help. Not from my parents in Ohio. They were too far away, too likely to panic. I needed someone here. Someone sharp and practical. I thought of Anya Sharma. We'd met years ago through work, both women in male-dominated fields, bonding over shared frustrations and late-night coding sessions. She'd left tech to go to law school and was now a corporate lawyer, sharp as a tack and fiercely loyal to her friends. I called her the next morning, my voice tight and shaky. "Anya," I whispered, the kids thankfully engrossed in cartoons. "I need your help. Something terrible is happening." I laid it all out for her. The suspicious charge, the hidden accounts, the apartment, Julian Croft, the divorce lawyer searches, the messages, the photos. I sent her screenshots, copies of bank statements, the apartment address. Anya listened patiently, her voice calm but firm on the other end of the line. "Alara," she said when I finished, "this is bad, but you're doing exactly the right thing. You're gathering evidence. In California, we're a no-fault state, which means you don't have to prove adultery to get a divorce. But this changes things. The financial deception, the potential hiding of assets, that's huge. And his character, his disregard for the kid's safety, that's going to matter for custody." She advised me on what to do next. First, find a secure place for all this data. An encrypted drive, a separate cloud account nobody else knows about. Document everything. Every transaction, every message, every photo, every date. Note down the little things too, like Buddy getting out, anything that shows his negligence or absence. Second, you need a lawyer, a good one. Someone who specializes in complex divorces with financial issues and custody battles. I can give you some names. Third, you need to protect yourself and your assets. Talk to the lawyer about freezing accounts, securing credit lines. And fourth, keep your composure. Don't let him know what you know until you're ready. You have the advantage of surprise. Her words were a lifeline, practical and empowering. I wasn't just a betrayed wife. I was a software engineer with a problem to solve. The objective, secure my children's future and expose the truth. I followed Anya's advice to the letter. I backed up all the evidence onto an encrypted external hard drive. I set up a separate, secure email account just for this. I started a detailed log, noting dates, times, specific instances of Marcus's behavior, his absences, anything that seemed relevant. I even went back and wrote down the Buddy incident, the date, the details, Marcus's reaction. It felt cold, clinical, but necessary. Anya recommended a lawyer, a woman named Miss Evelyn Reed, known for her sharp mind and aggressive approach in court. Her office was in a sleek skyscraper in downtown San Francisco, a world away from my suburban home. Meeting her felt like stepping onto a battlefield briefing. I showed her the evidence, my hands still trembling slightly as I slid the hard drive across her polished desk. Ms. Reed reviewed the files, her expression unreadable. When she looked up, her eyes were hard, focused. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice low and steady, "this is compelling. The financial trail is clear. The communications, they paint a vivid picture. And the fact that he was researching divorce lawyers and asset hiding before you even suspected anything, that shows intent. In a no-fault state, we can't punish him for the affair itself, but we can absolutely use this evidence to argue for a favorable asset division and, more importantly, to demonstrate why you should have primary custody of your children. His deceit, his financial irresponsibility, his apparent lack of focus on the children, this all speaks to his fitness as a parent and his trustworthiness in managing shared resources. We developed a strategy. We would file for divorce based on irreconcilable differences, the standard in a no-fault state. But we would simultaneously file motions to freeze certain accounts and request immediate financial disclosures, citing concerns about asset dissipation. We would also immediately seek a temporary custody order, arguing that given Marcus's behavior and priorities, the children's stability and well-being were best served by remaining primarily with me. Crucially, we would keep the extent of my evidence a secret until the opportune moment. The waiting was the hardest part. Living with Marcus, pretending everything was normal, was an agonizing performance. Every time he smiled, every time he casually touched my arm, I saw Julian Croft's face, the hidden apartment, the drained bank accounts. The children were my anchor. Their innocent faces, their laughter, their simple needs, they were why I was doing this. I couldn't let Marcus's recklessness and selfishness jeopardize their future. One evening, Marcus came home late, smelling strongly of the same unfamiliar floral perfume I'd noticed before. He breezed in, talking loudly about a successful meeting, a big deal he was closing. He didn't notice my silence, the cold steel that had settled beneath my skin. He was so good at the performance, so convinced of his own lies. It made my stomach turn. The day the papers were served was a blur. Ms. Reed had recommended having a process server deliver them at his office to avoid a scene at home with the children. I wasn't there, but I imagined his shock, the carefully constructed facade cracking in front of his colleagues. He came home that evening, not with shock, but with white-hot rage. He stormed into the living room where I was helping Liam with his homework, his face contorted. "What the hell, Ilara?" he roared, clutching the stack of papers. "Divorce, what is this?" I calmly closed Liam's math book. "It's exactly what it looks like, Marcus." "You can't do this," he yelled, his voice shaking. "We're married, we can fix this." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "Fix this," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Fix what? Your apartment in the city? Your relationship with Julian? The thousands you've siphoned out of our accounts? The future you were planning without us?" His face went pale. The bluster drained away, replaced by a flicker of fear. What are you talking about?" he stammered. "I know, Marcus," I said, standing up. The children were watching, wide-eyed. I kept my voice steady for them. "I know everything. The money, the apartment, Julian, all of it." He stared at me, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. You went through my things?" he accused, trying to regain some ground. "That's illegal." "No, Marcus. I said, a chill entering my voice. "What you did was illegal. Embezzling marital funds, planning to hide assets, that's fraud. And I have the receipts, all of them." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked cornered like an animal caught in a trap. He tried a different tactic. "You're crazy. Alara! You're making this up. This is some kind of breakdown." "Save it, Marcus," I said, walking towards him. "The gaslighting isn't going to work anymore. I have evidence. Lots of it. Your lawyer is going to have a very interesting time when Ms. Reed starts filing motions based on what I've found." He flinched at the mention of Ms. Reed's name. He knew her reputation. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He didn't stay that night. He packed a bag quickly, throwing clothes haphazardly into a suitcase. He didn't say goodbye to the children. He just walked out the front door, the slam echoing in the sudden silence. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal filings, discovery requests, and tense communications through lawyers. Marcus hired a lawyer, a man who tried to play hardball, but Ms. Reed was always one step ahead. Every time his lawyer argued that Alara was being unreasonable, or that Marcus was a devoted father and responsible husband, Miss Reed would counter with a filing backed by irrefutable evidence, bank statements, emails, digital records. The temporary custody hearing was particularly difficult. Marcus argued he should have 50-50 custody, portraying himself as an active, loving parent. I sat there listening to his lies, a knot of ice in my stomach. Miss Reed presented evidence. The dates he was supposedly on business trips that matched the photos with Julian in Napa, the financial records showing money spent on the apartment instead of family needs, and my detailed log, including the incident with Buddy and the gate, presented not as proof of malice, but as evidence of distraction and negligence that put the children at risk. Reed presented evidence. The dates he was supposedly on business trips that matched the photos with Julian in Napa, the financial records showing money spent on the apartment instead of family needs, and my digs. It was subtle, but it painted a picture of a man whose priorities were elsewhere. The judge listened carefully. He asked Marcus pointed questions about the financial discrepancies, questions Marcus struggled to answer convincingly. He asked about his travel schedule and how it impacted his time with the children. The ruling on temporary orders was a victory. I was granted primary physical custody, with Marcus receiving limited supervised visitation initially, pending further evaluation. The judge also issued orders freezing certain accounts and compelling Marcus to provide full financial disclosure immediately. It was a clear signal that the court was taking my evidence seriously. Marcus was furious. He escalated his tactics, trying to smear my name among mutual friends, spreading lies about me being unstable and greedy. But Anya and a few other close friends who knew the truth were there to counter his narrative. The evidence spoke louder than his words. The discovery phase was brutal. Marcus was forced to turn over years of financial records, communications, everything. My background in data analysis became invaluable. I worked closely with Miss Reed and a forensic accountant she recommended, sifting through spreadsheets, identifying hidden accounts, tracing diverted funds. It was like debugging the most complex, corrupted system I had ever encountered. We found more: hidden debts, investments made without my knowledge, funds transferred to accounts in Julian's name. The scale of the financial betrayal was staggering. Meanwhile, Marcus's relationship with Julian seemed to be deteriorating under the pressure. The carefree double life had crashed into the harsh reality of legal proceedings and financial fallout. I heard through the grapevine that they were fighting constantly. Julian, it turned out, was not just a casual affair partner. He was someone Marcus had invested heavily in, both emotionally and financially, promising him a certain lifestyle. Now that promise was crumbling. The final divorce trial was set for months later. California courts moved slowly, but deliberately. I used that time to prepare to strengthen my case and to focus on my children, helping them navigate the changes and the absence of their father, which, heartbreakingly, seemed to affect them less than I'd feared. They were resilient, finding comfort in routine and my unwavering presence. Liam still occasionally asked about the open gate, but now he associated it with Daddy being on his phone, distracted. The day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was sterile, formal. Marcus was there with his lawyer, looking pale and drawn. Julian was nowhere in sight. Ms. Reed was masterful. She presented the financial evidence with precision, laying out the timeline of Marcus's deception, the flow of money, the extent of the hidden assets and debts. She used the digital communications to show the nature of his relationship with Julian, and more importantly, his attitude towards his family and his responsibilities. She used my log and testimony, corroborated by the earlier temporary orders, to highlight his character flaws and argue against him having significant custody. Marcus testified, attempting to minimize his actions, to spin the narrative. He tried to portray the financial issues as simple, poor investments, and the affair as a mistake that had nothing to do with his ability to parent. He even tried to use my investigation against me, calling it an invasion of privacy. But Ms. Reed dismantled his arguments one by one. She showed that the poor investments were funds directed to Julian. She showed that his mistake involved years of calculated deception and planning to abandon his family. And she argued convincingly that while my gathering of evidence was driven by necessity and concern for our shared future, his actions were driven by selfishness and deceit. The most powerful moments came when Ms. Reed focused on the children. She didn't put them on the stand, but she presented evidence of Marcus's absences, his lack of involvement in their school or activities during the period of the affair, and the incident with Buddy and the gate as a metaphor for his overall negligence when distracted by his double life. She argued that a parent who could so easily disregard the safety of a beloved family pet due to preoccupation with a secret life was not a parent who should have primary responsibility for young children. Marcus's lawyer tried to object, but the judge allowed it. The argument resonated. It wasn't just about cheating. It was about character, trustworthiness, and prioritization. The judge's ruling came down a few weeks later. It was decisive. Alara was granted primary physical and legal custody of Liam and Maya. Marcus was granted limited, structured visitation, with the potential for it to increase over time, provided he met certain conditions, like attending therapy. The financial division heavily favored Alara, taking into account Marcus's dissipation of marital assets and his attempts to hide funds. He was ordered to pay significant child support and was left largely responsible for the debts he had incurred, funding his double life. It wasn't destroying him in the way the original story's protagonist had, but in a no-fault state, it was as close as legally possible. He lost the children, he lost a significant portion of the assets he had tried to protect, and his deceit was laid bare in a legal record. He didn't fight the final ruling. He was financially depleted and emotionally broken. Julian had apparently left the picture entirely once the full extent of Marcus's financial ruin became clear. The day Marcus came to collect his remaining belongings was quiet. I had arranged for him to come when the children were at school. He walked through the house that was now solely mine, with a defeated slump to his shoulders. He didn't say much, just packed boxes under my watchful eye. There was no dramatic confrontation, no breaking of photos, just the quiet, sad end of a life we had built together, revealed to be built on lies. After he left, I walked through the house, a strange mix of relief and emptiness washing over me. The air felt lighter, cleaner, free from the weight of his secrets and lies. Rebuilding wasn't easy. There were still financial hurdles to overcome, the emotional scars to heal, but I had my children, I had my home, and I had my job, and I had the quiet strength that came from facing the worst and surviving, from fighting for what was right and winning. Anya remained a steadfast friend, checking in, offering support. My parents visited from Ohio, their presence a comforting reminder of unconditional love. I looked at my children, playing in the backyard, Buddy chasing a squirrel, the gate now always securely latched. They were happy, adjusting. They rarely asked about their father anymore. He was a chapter that had closed. Sometimes late at night I would look back at the timeline of my discovery, the spreadsheets, the messages. I would see the small incident with Buddy and the gate, the first real crack I had seen, and I would remember the feeling of unease I had dismissed. The red flags had been there, subtle at first, then waving frantically.